Let's talk about John. John buys a lotto ticket every Saturday. He uses the same numbers and he never ever misses a week. Sometimes he even rushes to the shop to buy his ticket just before the deadline because he panics that the 1 week that he doesn't buy his ticket will be the week that he would have won.
It's you.
The phrase, "it could be you,"
It could be you.
is a little reminder that this time, maybe just this time, it could really be John's turn to strike it lucky and make a fortune. John eventually starts to buy scratch cards and play in the other lotto games as well, thinking that he has a good chance of winning. He's seen winners in the paper before, and recently, one of those winners was his exact age, and he won on his first ever ticket. John dreams about how he could buy a house with the money that he wins, and this is definitely how he's going to retire one day. Now, let's talk about Jane. Jane loves to go on holiday, but so far she's only been able to go to places in the UK. She does dream of visiting other more exotic countries and even thinks about going all the way to the other side of the world. But Jane hasn't been able to do this so far. Unfortunately, she has a fear of flying. Jane just has this overriding feeling that the plane is going to crash. She envisions images of plane crashes like she's seen on the news or in movies, like on a silver screen. She just doesn't think that she's going to make it off the plane alive. So what do John and Jane both have in common? Yes, of course, they both sound quite irrational and a bit strange, but the traits they're showing are both actually linked to something known as availability bias. Availability bias is a cognitive bias that causes us to base our judgments or estimate probabilities on thoughts or stories that immediately come to mind. And when we can't control this availability bias, it can actually lead us to thinking irrationally. Let me explain. You see, our brain has the tendency to recall information or stories that are more recent, more extreme, or more dramatic, rather than things that are from further in the past, so less recent or less over the top. Now, ultimately, this can override any rational thoughts and make us believe that that first thought that springs to mind is the correct thought, rather than thinking a bit deeper about it. So when we look at John, we can see that the reason he still buys his lotto ticket is the thought that it could be him. It could be him that wins it this time. Now, of course, this is partly thanks to clever marketing and promotion using that phrase, "it could be you," but also from reading about the story of other winners. When we read stories like these, the images will stick in our head way more than the fact that the majority of people don't win. When we think about the lotto, we're going to be thinking about that person that was quite similar to us who won with their first ticket. Now, the number of people not winning the lottery is not reported or publicised in the same way as the winners' stories. So although deep down John does know about the low probability of winning, this is not what's in his mind when he's buying his ticket. Availability bias is making him overestimate the probability of him winning. In Jane's case, she's seen stories on the news about plane crashes and seen them dramatised in movies. Now, plane crashes are very unlikely, but this doesn't matter to Jane because her availability bias is causing her overriding thoughts to be focused on the drama of a crash. That makes her thoughts very irrational and hard to overcome, so this is leading to her fear of flying. As you might expect, availability bias also rears its ugly head in the financial markets. In the same way that it can cause fear of things like plane crashes or shark attacks, especially if you've been watching Sharknado, it can also cause fear in the financial markets, which can then influence our decisions about possible trade opportunities or the positions that we have open. So let's go through an example. Adam opened a live trading account before he had even taken the time to learn properly. Like many people do, he got overconfident because of seeing story after story on Instagram about people getting rich quick. And so he decided to chuck his entire life savings into it. Needless to say, he eventually burnt out his account since he didn't know what he was doing. And this was a traumatic experience for him. But fast forward a few years, and after learning how to trade properly and getting consistently profitable results on his demo account, with a system that he trusts in, Adam is ready to go live. But when he does, He keeps missing every trade opportunity that could have led to a profit. Each time the market is going his way, his fear takes over and he just can't open a trade. Or when he does, those few occasions he does open a trade, he immediately closes it for small profits rather than letting the position reach its full potential. Basically, availability bias is getting in the way for him and causing overriding thoughts of losing all his money again, despite deep down knowing that he has a consistently profitable approach now. That quick example, which is actually really common, shows us already two different ways that availability bias can affect us in the markets. The first way is by overestimating the probability of winning as an amateur. This is thanks to things like stories on social media of other traders getting rich quickly. This is just like John with his lottery ticket and the stories of previous winners. It gets into your head. And the second way, that came a little bit later for Adam, is the availability bias causing fear because of an unpleasant experience or a story that you've heard in the past, which then stops us wanting to do something. This is just like Jane with her fear of flying. You know, Adam has this fear of losing all of his money. This issue of availability bias is something that was studied by the famous psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. They said, if you can think of it, it must be important. Basically meaning that people unconsciously assume that if something comes straight to mind without having to think it through properly, then it must be more important or more accurate. Otherwise, why did it spring to mind in the first place? They also say that if you see or hear an example of something, you're more likely to think that it's going to happen to you. So if you hear about your neighbor's house being broken into and burgled, you're more likely to assume that this is more common than it actually is and that it's going to happen to you as well. Or if a friend of yours is in a car accident, this will be at the forefront of your mind, and the next time you get into a car, you could well start thinking that this is going to happen to you as well. When these sort of incidents occur, they're quite unusual in our everyday life, and therefore they hold much more significance in our mind, and they lead us to believe that they're a lot more common than they actually are. We don't truly put the probabilities of these incidents happening into perspective. We need to be more aware that our immediate thoughts are not necessarily fact, and we should never rely on them on their own. Instead, we need to use the tools that we have at our disposal. If we're making decisions in the financial markets, we should be trusting in our analysis and our systems, instead of relying on a gut instinct or a hunch, no matter how good it may seem. And any irrational fears in our personal lives, such as fear of flying or fear of burning out our account even though we know we have a consistent system, these can be improved by learning the true statistics of the likelihood of that thing occurring and realizing that maybe it's not quite as common as our availability bias is leading us to believe. Alright guys, that's all for now. If you liked the video, then please do hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos like this one, and why not leave a little comment below letting me know what you thought or any questions that you have. If you want to know more about trading psychology or the psychology of the financial markets, then in the description box there is a link to a playlist which is going to cover a lot more topics in this area. And if you want to know more about trading in general, then I'd recommend getting started on our free course. The link again is in the description box, so go and check that one out. I really appreciate you watching. I'll see you in the next video. Take care. See you then.